so Judy's question is whether we should be really pushing for people to get the second shot, or just pushing for people to get only one shot. And I would say there are still experts who disagree. There was a pretty prominent article in Science a few weeks ago that argued theoretically people, if they get just one shot and they don't have as much resistance to the virus, that they will be little factories for creating new virus strains. And that's theoretical. I think it came out in Science. It's probably a good paper. So that is a possibility. But at the same time, there are many experts who are advocating that we try to vaccinate everyone as quickly as possible, even if it just means one dose initially. And so I would still say experts disagree, and the strains have not really changed that calculus too much.
Yeah. I'm reading a lot of really good experts disagree. Like, should we keep vaccines in freezers, or as long as we have them, inject as many people as possible? Should we hold off giving people the booster to make sure that more people get vaccinated? It's an ongoing question, but there is no doubt that I think the Pfizer one especially, the benefits of the booster are great.
Yeah. I mean, and there's no question that we want to get as many people vaccinated as possible, whether it's one vaccine or two vaccines, 2 doses or 1 dose. So that remains true. Okay, so I want to switch gears a little bit to looking at masks. And I first want to say that this is another area where there's not been a ton of research done on the subject. I honestly could only find one study that I liked, and even that had issues. But we do know a little bit. And I first want to talk about how COVID-19 spreads, because there's really 2 ways. The first is by droplets. These are relatively large drops of liquid that you might even be able to see with the naked eye, like when someone sneezes or coughs, and you can actually see little bits of snot coming out of their mouth or their nose. Now, what's good about droplets is that they're affected by gravity. So it's kind of like shooting like a little virus cannonball at someone else from your mouth to another person's mouth. And so wearing a mask, even a mask that like maybe doesn't fit that well, is going to help. As long as it covers both your nose and your mouth, that mask is going to prevent those cannonballs. Now, the second one are aerosols, and you can see in this image how aerosols are different. They're much smaller, they're not visible, and they're sort of like cigarette smoke. They will linger in the air for a long time, especially in an enclosed space, and they're not affected much by gravity, so they just kind of hang out in the air. And honestly, we still don't know how big of a role aerosols play in spreading COVID-19. This has been a debate since the very beginning. People said, oh, it's all about droplets. And CDC guidelines have changed a little bit. They have started to recognize the role of aerosols, of these small particles. And the idea, of course, is that whether it's a droplet or an aerosol, inside these little liquid drops are virus. And so they're spreading to you. Now, the reason that people are now starting to think a little bit more about aerosols is that for these new strains, like the UK strain, which we know is more contagious, and possibly the Brazil and South Africa strains, it may be possible that they are more easily transmitted because they require just a very small amount of virus, like you might find in an aerosol rather than a droplet, to get sick. So they may spread more easily via aerosol. So it may be worth us thinking about aerosols a little harder, and that's what I'm going to do here. So I talked about one paper that I kind of liked. This is a chart from that paper, and this paper has not been peer reviewed, so could be mistakes here. But they looked at aerosols, so you can sort of see the size here from 1 micron on the right all the way down to really quite small sizes on the left. And this is a tough plot to read for sure, because they've got all these like error bars around all their dotted lines. But what you can see is that the surgical mask in pink here, this pink line third from the top, did a fair bit better than normal materials that we see, like cotton, thin cotton here, bandana, these sewn and non-sewn masks. Which, I mean, some of them did worse than others, but it's clear that the surgical mask really improved them all, improved over most of them. Probably nobody's going to be strapping a vacuum bag to their face, and you don't see a lot of microfiber masks out there, but if you find one, that's maybe not a bad way to go. Um, so if you are concerned about aerosols, then, and I think it's reasonable to be, you may want to think about getting a surgical mask. And so that would look like this. And the reason surgical masks are different from maybe just like a cotton mask is that cotton masks, typically people talk about 2-ply cotton masks. And cotton is a pretty thin material. It's, there's really just one layer, and it's tightly woven. But if the aerosol gets through that layer, and it's kind of, you're done for. Whereas the surgical masks, these are a little bit thicker, and most of them, if they're good, have 3 layers. And the inside layer is this melt blown plastic, basically. That is this like web of fibers that is a little thicker and is going to block more of those aerosol particles than your typical cloth mask. So and I apologize, there's not a lot of science here. So this is sort of the general what people seem to think, experts seem to think, are the best practices. So the most important is that you ensure your mask fits well. So for droplets, right, the really big pieces, fit isn't that important. Like, you can have some space up here and some space down there, but as long as your nose and mouth are covered, you're not going to be spewing out droplets. But the aerosols, they're so small that, and they are carried by the air so well, that in this little space here between your face and the mask, those aerosols are going to escape, or you're going to be sucking them in. And so you really want to make sure that you press down on your mask so that it's really tight against your face. And that can be tough to get with a mask. But you want it so that all the air that you are breathing in or out, is going through the mask, that it's not slipping through underneath or through the sides. And that's tough to get, because this is basically a rectangle that we're trying to shape to our face. But having like a nose clip is really good. And so what people recommend, if you have some sort of surgical mask, is that you double mask. So I tend to find that these surgical masks, when I talk, they drop down. I have a pretty big nose, but they kind of drop down. And so what people recommend is that you put like a cloth mask over your surgical mask. And then even if you're talking a lot and like really gesticulating, like it doesn't drop down that bad. It kind of holds it in place and ensures that most of the air is actually going through the mask. So that's what people seem to recommend, is a surgical mask on the bottom to ensure that you are getting good filtration against those aerosols, and then putting some sort of cotton mask over it that is tighter and can really hold it to your face. You can also take the straps and make little loops in the straps so that it's a little tighter on your ear, a little tighter on your face. That may be uncomfortable, obviously. And then, okay, so that's kind of fit, but you want to make sure all the air is going through the mask and not out the sides and all over the place. The next is that 3-ply, so something like a surgical mask is generally better, seems to perform better than a cotton mask. You can buy these online. They recommend looking for something called ASTM on the box. This is a box. I don't know if you can read this, but right there, this says ASTM level 2. And so there's different levels of ASTM. that's a group that sort of certifies this. The higher levels are better, and so I would recommend, if you have a surgical, if you're getting a surgical mask, trying to see if it's ASTM 2 or 3. This is 2. And then, I have another mask here, and there's also N95s, right? So if these should offer the best protection, and a lot of that comes down to they're just really thick, so they have a lot of space for those aerosols to get stuck. And N95 means that even for the hardest to filter particles, which are sort of in the aerosol range, 95% of those are getting filtered. So that's really good. It's a good material. And then also these tend to just fit really well. I mean, they've got the double strap, and you got this good metal nose piece here. And so that's going to be really important for ensuring a good fit. So now obviously this has a little vent on the front, so it's great for breathing in, but I'm still spewing all my aerosol towards everybody. So you got to put another mask on it if you got the vent. So that's N95. People asked about the KF. So I'd say if you can't find an N95, and they are hard to find, and this is a really old one, because of a lot of the medical workers are using them. The next best is probably something called a KF94, which is a Korean brand or Korean certification, and they tend to be pretty reliable. There's a KN95, which is those are certified by China, and there's just a lot of fakes out there, unfortunately, is what people say. So try to go for the Korean masks if you can. And then the last one is just, even if you don't have a great mask, any mask is better than no mask. So especially you should wear them outdoors too, but especially indoors. Always make sure you've got a mask on, because any mask, as long as it protects your nose, as long as it covers your nose and mouth, will protect you from droplets, which I think are still sort of the most concerning part of this. So I hope that was helpful. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat. And I'll pass it off to Crystal.